Okay, I think we're live. Dimitri, please verify that you can see and hear me. Okay, great. So, hi everyone. Welcome to the 11th session of the University of Nicosia's free MOOC on digital currencies. This is Giaglis, and our topic today will be our decentralized future. As we discussed last week, these last 2 weeks of the course, we're going to move away from blockchain as a focus. We're going to take a step back and look at the wider trends within blockchain as a technology and its applications are functioning, and discuss the future of our world and the role that crypto assets, tokens, digital assets, and blockchain-based applications are going to have in this world. As we did last week, I'm not going to go through the whole presentation. Hopefully our internet is going to be a bit better today. I am going to focus on the main points that I would like to make today, and I will be answering your questions as you posted them on our Moodle as I go along the slides. In the meantime, as always, feel free to use our YouTube chat to post any other questions that you would like us to take live. So, without further ado, let's move to the next slide, which is this one. The point that I'm trying to make today is that we live at a historical juncture, and we are at the intersection of crossroads in which a number of technologies are maturing at the same time. Blockchain is not the only one of them. Maybe some would say that it's not even the most important of them. But anyway, the fact that we have a number of foundational infrastructure technologies, all of them reaching commercial maturity at more or less the same time, is going to create a disruptive wave, which I personally think, and there are many analysts that would agree with this, is not going to be similar to anything that we have seen up to now. People are saying that we live in the fourth industrial revolution, as I show in the slides for those of you that had the chance to go through them. I think it's even more than that. The revolution that we are going through is not a next step of the industrial revolution. We're going to a totally different phase, which is historic in human timeline proportions. I mean the existence of humans on Earth. And I think the focal point in time where we will see the full spectrum of the implications of this revolution is this famous singularity. I don't know if it's going to be a single, point in time. It's most probably going to be a period, but by singularity we mean the time when machines are going to outsmart humans. There are different opinions as to when this will happen and the extent to which this will happen, but I think up to now no one would disagree that we are heading there. In our lifetimes, probably, we will see a world in which machines are going to be, by and large, smarter than us. And I'm not talking about, being better chess player than us, because we know that since 1997, I think, when IBM's Deep Blue beat Kasparov and became the first machine that was better than the then world's best chess player at playing chess, we know that what we call narrow intelligence exists. So there are machines that are smarter than us, an order of magnitude smarter than us in specific tasks. What I'm talking about here and what the singularity is about is a period that we would call the artificial intelligence, what we call artificial general intelligence. So a period in which we will have machines that will be better than us in a range of activities, and they will be able to learn by themselves new activities and acquire new skills during their lifetime. And this will unleash a future in which we will see interesting new trends. I think decentralization encapsulates much of what we're going to see in the way that at least commercial transactions are going to take place. We have built a world, as we discussed last week, in which there seem to be intermediaries in many, if not all, of the activities that we do. So our value chains seem to be multi-stage, having a number of organizations or a number of people mediating transactions, either directly or indirectly by providing functions such as trust. Decentralization is about disintermediating economies, is about moving to much shorter value chains. And one of the things that this might unleash, as we discussed last week, is moving from the Internet of Information to the Internet of Value. And this is where blockchain and crypto and digital assets are going to play a huge role. The second thing is that if machines are going to be smarter than us, we will live through a period in which machines are going to enter the economic landscape. So they will become semi-independent or independent agents and actors in commercial transactions. In other words, up to now, when there is a commercial transaction, there are two humans at the end or two organizations that humans work in at the end. We have very few examples of transactions in which people are transacting with machines, although we do have such examples nowadays, and we have even fewer examples of machines transacting in an economic sense. I mean transacting, not just communicating and exchanging bits and bytes with other machines. My prediction is that in 10, 15, 20 years from now, the majority of commercial economic transactions are going to be carried between machines, and humans will need to find a different role in the economy of future societies. And I think one other implication is that we will see new forms of organizations, new forms of corporations, that are not going to be based so much on human capital as the knowledge-based organizations of today are. And at the extreme, we will see organizations that will exist only as computer code. So the whole organization is going to be a bunch of computer code, maybe in the future self-improving code, so machine learning based code that will be able to learn from its experience and will be able to autonomously operate in a commercial setting. And obviously the implications for economic growth and social disruption are going to be huge. We're talking about a different world, a world that has nothing with anything that we have ever seen up to now. At the very extreme, I would dare say that we would need to learn to live in a world in which we are not the smartest species on the planet anymore. So there's going to be smarter species than us, and these are going to be species that we created, and they are going to be our machines. So this is the thesis of today's and next week's lectures. So as you see in this slide, what has made many analysts think that we are going to live in a world that will change dramatically is the fact that human intelligence, since, I don't know, 50,000 BC, when the first Homo sapiens roamed this earth, the human intelligence, the human intellect, has improved in Darwinian terms. It has improved only linearly and very slowly. I mean, surely we are smarter than our ancestors, I mean, our ancient hunter-gatherer ancestors, but we are not that smart, that smarter. We are perhaps, I don't know, like a few times smarter. Machines are very new, and they have obviously been much less intelligent than humans up to now. The thing is that their intelligence, though, is progressing at an exponential speed. And as we've seen, and I guess now with the pandemic, many people have realized the power of exponential curves. When something is increasing at an exponential rate, it might seem slow in the beginning. So how the machines became as intelligent as they are today was not easy to predict for someone looking at machines in the 50s or 60s or 70s or 80s or even 90s. But in the past 20 years, we have seen this rate of increase in machine intelligence picking up, and the rate is picking up itself. So we have a doubly accelerating trend. And at some point, we will reach the singularity. And the singularity will be, as I said, when machines reach collectively the collective intelligence of humans. The interesting thing there is that, if today was the day that machines became as smart as we are, it's not that they will be twice as smart in like 50,000 years from now. They will probably be twice as smart in, 5 years from now. And then they're going to be twice as smart from that in 2 years from then. And then they're going to double their intelligence in another year, and then another 6 months, because they're moving at an exponential rate. And obviously at some point, they will become so much more intelligent than us that we will have a difficult time in keeping up with them. And you may have heard of that famous story when Facebook was using machine learning to train bots on their messenger platform to do negotiations. So the idea was that they would train a bot to converse with a human being on Messenger and enter into some type of negotiation, having some goal from that discussion. And the Facebook engineers started working with these bots. Those of you that are a bit familiar with machine learning, you know that the algorithms become better and better the more data that you have on which to train them. So the more discussions that these bots entered in, the more intelligent they became. But at some point, someone thought, we're moving at a slow speed, so why not, instead of us conversing with the bots and using this as data to train the algorithm, let the bots talk to themselves. This will allow them to have millions of conversations or billions of conversations overnight, and hopefully they will become, much more intelligent. So they did that, and they left the machines, the bots, the software, talking to themselves overnight. And the next morning, when they went back to the office, they realized that the bots were still talking to each other on Messenger, but in the process, they had developed what the Facebook engineers said, non-human language. So they started conversing using symbols, and we simply couldn't understand what they were saying. Maybe they were saying gibberish, maybe the whole conversation didn't have any point. Maybe it had a point and we were just too dumb to understand. What I'm trying to say is that when machines become more intelligent than us, sooner rather than later, they will become orders of magnitude more intelligent than us. And this is the reason why we have seen so many discussions about the post-singularity world, whether this would allow us to become superhumans, or whether this will unleash a period in which, machines are going to dominate us, or some other dystopian future. Moving back to blockchain though, the other major point that I had for this week was the fact that, as I said, that the first generation of blockchains was characterized by expectations about full decentralization. And people thought that, we unleashed a technology that is going to change the world in ways in which all intermediaries, starting from, financial institutions and banks, and moving up to the notion of government and the nation state or whatever, are not going to be needed anymore. We are going to delegate trust to algorithms, so all of the trust building institutions that we've built to facilitate trust between us are not going to be needed anymore. And this remains a spoken or unspoken vision of, let's say, the cryptocurrency maximalists. I hate to disappoint you, but at least my personal prediction is that we are not going to see that. We are going to live in a more decentralized world, yes, but not a fully decentralized one. These expectations are very inflated. What is going to happen is that we will unleash a wave of creative disruption as the players of the pre-blockchain internet economy are going to be losing their market dominance. I think I hinted about that last week, but think of the following. The internet era unleashed a number of huge corporations that are now the world's largest companies, as you have seen in one of the slides in this week's presentation. So these companies are, Apple or Facebook or Microsoft or you name it. And this was expected. Maybe we didn't know whether Google would win the search war, but we sort of knew that one of these companies would win that war and would become a de facto monopoly. Because in these economies, the internet-based economies, due to network effects, they tend to favor monopolies. So we knew that the corporations of the past, the biggest companies of the pre-internet era, would recede and give their place to the new economy players that we have today. Although you might think that companies like Google and Microsoft and Amazon and Netflix and Airbnb and you name it are here to stay because they are established monopolies in their markets, this is not going to be the case. In most likelihood, as it has always happened, when we have a new era, some of these companies will go bust. They don't seem like candidates to go bust now, obviously, but neither did, Kodak in the past, and they went bust, in 10 years, or Hertz that I had in the slides as an example. They will go bust if they will not be able to adapt their business models to the new economy. And this economy, let's call it the token economy, is going to give rise to new markets, and there's going to be new companies. Some of them might be companies that exist today, that are smaller and rising in the crypto world, or they might be companies that have not been incorporated yet, but this move towards decentralization and this move towards blockchain is going to create new economies. And these economies, the players in this economy, are going to become new intermediaries. And they are going to capture the new market. So the world is not going to be fully decentralized, it's going to be again mediated by trust players, but these players are going to be different than the ones we have today. And I think if I wanted you to focus on a couple of slides in this week's presentation, these will be the ones. In order to understand how blockchain is going to change the world, it is useful to take a step back and think about the internet changed our world. So in the world of the internet, what happened? And this is a typical case with new technologies. First, a new technology is being invented, and this technology creates a foundational infrastructure for new application. So in the case of internet, what happened was that we invented TCP/IP and we created a distributed network around the world where information could be freely exchanged. When we start realizing the business potential of this new technology, what all of us seem to do is we think about how we would move existing business to new infrastructure. So we said, we had banking, now on the internet we're gonna do e-banking. We did retail shopping and we would do e-shopping. And that's all very nice, but the most important thing is what happens next in the third wave. The first part of the third wave is a wave of disintermediation, where the old economy players that cannot adapt themselves to the new economy get eliminated or pivot to the new economy if they can. And then new business models arise that couldn't have existed earlier, and they are dominated by new players. So in the case of the internet, we have companies like, as I said, Netflix or Instagram or Uber or Lyft that couldn't have existed in the pre-internet world, and they became what they are now. And I think that this is exactly what is going to happen in the world of blockchain as well. So let's take this slide and compare it to what's happening now. And what's happening now is that we have again a new technology that creates a new foundational infrastructure. In our days, this is not the internet, it's blockchain. And instead of democratizing exchange of information, now we're democratizing exchange of value, or we're democratizing trust. And what we do, and this is, I think, where we are today, this top box there, we think about how we would move existing business to blockchain. So people are starting to think, about health applications of blockchain or supply chain applications of blockchain, or you name it. But then I think the important thing is, and I just realized that you cannot see it in the slide. Let me see if I can move myself out of the way. Okay, that's probably better. Then we will have two things happening at the same time as we did in the case of the internet. The first wave is going to be a wave of disintermediation, or as theorists call it, a wave of creative destruction, where irrelevant players that won't be able to reinvent themselves for the decentralized world will get eliminated. I don't know if that's going to be, Facebook, because we're all going to move to some decentralized form of a social network, or whether this is going to be the banks, because we are all going to move to digital currencies. But the big players of the internet economy are not going to simply transition to the blockchain economy. What will happen is that we will start inventing new business models that are native to the blockchain economy, that they couldn't have existed earlier. Models like the ones we discussed last week, so decentralized finance, self-sovereign identities, DAOs, and things like that. And new players will emerge, and some of them will become the hated players of the new era, because they're going to simply grow to become monopolies in their markets, and they're going to be the new dominant players in the industry. So sorry to break the vision of those of you that believe in full decentralization. It's not going to happen. And when we think about decentralization, let's think about these two waves, disintermediation and cybermediation. Let's think first of all about disintermediation. So who's going to be eliminated? I like this definition of blockchain a lot, so I use it a lot because I think it's one of the most succinct definitions what's happening in our world. And this definition says that a blockchain is a technology that allows untrusted parties, so parties that do not know each other, to reach agreement or a consensus on some sort of a shared digital history, what has happened in the digital domain, without a middleman. So who's gonna be disintermediated in the blockchain economy? The middleman. Whoever sits in the middle of transactions between untrusted parties that need to reach consensus on what has happened in the past. So effectively we are moving to an algorithmic governance of trust. So anyone who's mediating this will be disintermediated. And when Bitcoin came out, one of the first things that people thought was, okay, the banks are going to be disintermediated. Why are they going to be disintermediated? Because George and Dimitris are going to be exchanging money with one another, Bitcoin I mean, or whatever, without needing a bank. Sorry to say that again, but I think again that this is a very simplistic way of looking at things. Yes, George and Dimitris are going to be exchanging digital currencies, but on the whole, this is good for the banks, not bad for them in the grand scheme of things. Because George and Dimitris, the average George and the average Dimitris, not George the digital currency expert or whatever, are not going to be willing or even capable of managing their private keys and multiple wallets and staking their currency and be able to address what happens in a hard fork of their currency or whatever. They would need some trusted middleman in order to provide custody and digital currency management services for them. And who better to do that than the bank, the guy that has always been your trusted intermediary when it comes to your money. So the banks are not going to find themselves in a difficult position because of digital currency. They are going to find themselves in a difficult position because of central bank digital currency. Because in the value chain of money, the central bank is the issuer of money in any sovereign jurisdiction, and commercial banks have their accounts with the central banks. The citizens and businesses in that economy the general public can only have their account with the commercial banks. I, as George, cannot go to the European Central Bank and say, hi, I would like to open an account with you. Okay? So the banks mediate and control the relationship between the general public, who are the users of money, and the central banks, who are the issuers of money. Well, think what's going to happen now. Who's the middleman? If central banks create, and they are going, and I don't see any way that this trend is going to be reversed, they are going to issue central bank digital currencies and distribute them directly to the population, then for the first time the general public will be able to have an account directly with the central bank. So they will be bypassing the banks, and the banks that will not be able to reinvent themselves in this new economy are going to face issues. And they might be disintermediated, but not for the reasons that we initially thought. So that's one frame of thinking about disintermediation. But the most interesting thing is about thinking about cyber mediation. So as I said, in the new blockchain economy, new business models will emerge and new players will emerge. I see that Daniel has a question. He says, do you think that banks will transition their business to a model where they will store digital assets and cryptocurrencies, otherwise they will die? Well, the otherwise will die is probably an exaggeration, at least for the foreseeable future, but the answer, at least as far as I am concerned, is a clear yes. I think that, and I will find it very funny because I went and started working with Bitcoin in 2012, and back in these days, digital currencies were anathema to the banks. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. and you will see in a few years' time when the central banks are going to move to either token-based, blockchain-based, or other forms of disintermediating digital money, I'm sure that you will see suddenly the banks loving digital currencies, and one of the first services that they are going to offer is digital currency custody. So they will be storing digital assets and cryptocurrencies for us, for a fee of course, and they will be providing all sorts of services like, allowing us to invest our money in liquidity pools, and we participate in DeFi without having the fear of, a smart contract being hacked or whatever, because we will have an insurance policy that we will buy from our bank in case of this happening, and so on. So you see how the intermediaries will try to reposition themselves in the new economy. And I can predict that those that do it at the right time will not only not die, but they might flourish in the new economy, and there will be banks that will face challenges because they will be more conservative and they will not be moving to that when their market does. Rahul is saying that central bank can deploy wholesale CBDCs without commercial banks instead of making them redundant. Again, yes and no. First of all, wholesale CBDCs are not leaving the banks out. They are leaving us out. They are leaving the general public out. So wholesale CBDCs are central bank digital currencies that are used to clear transactions either between central banks or between central banks and commercial banks. And that's one family of central bank digital currencies. And yes, nobody's being disintermediated there because there's no one to mediate the relationship. The preceding discussion was about retail CBDCs, when the central bank does something with the public, and they will do it. I mean, maybe they don't want to do it, but the forces of competition are amazing in a capitalist economy. You might have noticed that the central banks starting to move towards central bank digital currencies en masse when Facebook announced Libra, and when they realized that there's now a global player that has presence around the whole world, that can create a sort of private money that would be more akin to the fiat currency than to Bitcoin, and so it creates a threat to the current model of sovereign-based central money issuance. Then everyone was forced to do that, and I think that this will continue, and we will have retail CBDCs in the future. Again, Rahul is saying that central banks may not have the bandwidth to handle millions of accounts, perhaps. Well, they will build it. Central banks have one of the most amazing business models in the world. By definition, they cannot go bankrupt. So it's the only company that cannot go bankrupt. Even a government can go bankrupt, and central bank cannot, because by definition they can always print themselves out of trouble. So they will build the capacity and the bandwidth to do whatever. Today we have crypto banks like Kraken and Avanti that have licenses to operate in Wyoming. They're custodians of crypto. Perhaps traditional banks will have to reinvent themselves. Yes, that's an excellent point. And this is a point exactly of what's happening now in our economies as far as the disintermediation effect is being concerned. You have traditional banks on the one hand, and you have crypto exchanges, let's say like Kraken or Coinbase in the other. And you see that both the banks, some of the banks, are going towards digital currencies. You see, for example, Frick or Signum in Switzerland getting crypto banking licenses. So you have banks, either traditional or new ones, that are friendly to crypto, and you have crypto companies moving to banking. And this is how the two worlds are going to blend. So this is an excellent example of how the dynamics of this, the economics of this game are being played. Nishad is saying that commercial banks will become brokers for digital assets like Bitcoin. This will provide healthy competition for CBDCs. Yes, I agree. It's interesting that once you have a digital euro or a digital dollar or a digital yen or a digital yuan, as we have already with DCEP, suddenly Bitcoin and the other types of decentralized currencies become slightly more legitimized, if not in law, in our minds, in the mind of the general populace. When you can transact with a blockchain-based money issued by the Fed, why not transact with a similar one issued by no one? So yes, it will be a healthy competition and will help digital currencies as well. Rahul is asking whether the central banks can distribute retail CBDCs through the commercial banking system. Yes, it's all a matter of design choices. So you can build CBDCs in a number of ways. You can build them without having a blockchain at all. You can build them with other technologies. You can build them with distributed databases or even centralized databases. You don't need to do anything blockchain based. You can distribute them directly to the population. You can have commercial banks doing the distribution. You can have them be more akin to cash, so anonymous and non-interest bearing, or more akin to bank accounts, so interest bearing and eponymous. There's all sorts of things that you can do, and I'm sure that we will see all sorts of things in the beginning, because as Victoria is very rightly mentioning, diversity is necessary for decentralization. So these are all things that are contributing to a trend that is unavoidable. So moving to cyber mediation. Again, I will use the same definition. If we agree that blockchain as a technology allows parties that do not know each other to reach consensus on what has happened on a digital domain without a middleman, which is the truly new thing here that will create wholly new business models that couldn't have existed at least 100% same in the internet economy. And I think the key there is in what I've circled in red is who are the untrusted parties. We have been thinking, when we hear a definition like this, we're thinking about physical persons or corporations as untrusted parties that could facilitate such transactions. But in an economy in which we will have intelligent machines, because we will have the singularity and artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things and everything, these untrusted parties are not going to be only humans. They're going to be objects. They're going to be everyday objects that have computing and sensory abilities. They're going to be machines. They're going to be computers. They're going to be software agents. They're going to be deployments of smart contracts on a blockchain that have intelligence built into them. So these untrusted parties are going to be beyond the human realm. And let me move here. You will have seen this slide. I'm not going to go into details on that. I'm going to move to your questions, because I think this is an important discussion that we will have next week. We will devote our last session next week in discussing how blockchain will converge with at least two of the other exponential technologies of our world, and that is artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things, to create a new machine economy. So this will be, this slide, keep it in your mind, because this will be the focus of our attention next week. Let me move to your questions, both those that are being asked now in the chat and those that we have in that were posted by students in the Moodle. You will allow me to start by the ones in Moodle. So the first question was by Milton, who's asking, since the future is not going to be fully decentralized, where do the trade-offs lie, and will this not affect the flow of things in the fourth industrial revolution? Well, I think we mostly answered this in the preceding discussion. My predictions, and again, we are discussing the future now, so folks, please take everything that I'm saying with a grain of salt. These are not, we are entering difficult territories here, and we are discussing complicated subjects, so I might be wrong in my predictions. So this is, consider this as personal opinions, although, without boasting too much, I think I have a good track record in predicting such long-term trends. We are moving, as I said, towards decentralization and then back towards centralization. You can think the world as a I don't know the word in English, this type of clock that moves from one direction, as a pendulum, from one direction to the other. And there are technologies that allow us to break free from intermediaries of the past. So the internet was such technology, but they create new intermediaries in the process. So we are living through a same, I think, pattern now. Blockchain is going to create a wave of decentralization at first, letting us break away from the existing big tech companies that dominate their industries in the internet economy, but in the process, artificial intelligence, blockchain, smart contracts, digital assets are going to create new such corporations. So we will have trade-offs between centralization and decentralization in these economies. Mehul, the second question says, I'd love to hear more discussed on what the convergence of IoT, smart contracts, AI, machine learning and blockchain would look like, with examples and stuff like that. And he gives a very good example with GPS. I would ask you, Mehul, and everyone else to be patient for one more week. We're going to discuss many such examples next week. Then Wolfgang gave us a number of pointers about reading about the coming singularity. I've read Bostrom's book on superintelligence. Is super interesting, although a bit difficult at some points. There are a number of books that you could read, and it's interesting to see what's happening, because this book was written in 2016. 2016, we didn't even have, AlphaGo beat the world's best Go player. So the speed at which artificial intelligence is progressing is phenomenal. So keep searching about what's happening. We have things happening all the time. Mark is asking about a book titled COVID-19: The Great Reset, that is about the great global financial reset that is going to be happening due to the pandemic. I haven't read the book. I'm not familiar with it, so I cannot comment on the book. Again, let me give you my personal feeling. The pandemic is obviously a very disruptive event, or somewhat disruptive. It is not in the sphere of events that hadn't been predicted that would happen at some point. But although popular literature would make you think that these events redefine the course of our world, I don't think that that's the case. I think quite the opposite. These events like these, not only they do not change direction in the overall direction of history, but they tend to accelerate pre-existing trends. So the trend towards, doing virtual meetings was already there. It became a necessity due to COVID, and we're probably not going to get back to our offices when the pandemic is going to change, is going to end. It's not that these trends are new; they were old trends that might take 5 or 10 years to materialize, and now they materialized in like 6 months. So I think that COVID is important in accelerating the trend toward what we're discussing this week rather than changing it. Andrew is asking about the applications of decentralized management of university degrees and the accredited recognition of non-US degree levels. Okay, that's not 100% on what we are covering in this week, but let me tell you that one of the applications of decentralization, for better or worse, because I work in a university, this is my career, but it's not going to be the case that blockchain is going to disrupt all industries, but not conveniently stop outside the gates of universities, and they're not going to disrupt us, because many people are they find it easy to think about disruption for everyone else, but when it comes to disruption about themselves, this myopia kicks in and we say no, it's not going to happen. Of course, universities are going to be decentralized, education is going to be decentralized, accreditation of degrees is going to be decentralized. Universities are to a large extent gatekeepers of knowledge. They have been so since the monasteries of the Renaissance, so this is a business model that is ripe for change. It's not going to change in a 5 or 10 year horizon. It's going to probably change in a 50 or 100 year horizon, but it is going to change. As you know, in the University of Nicosia and now many other universities are pioneering the issuance of decentralized certificates, which would allow you to verify the authenticity of your degree in posterity without needing to contact the university. So theoretically, the University of Nicosia could shut down its doors tomorrow and we all go to the Bahamas or wherever, if we could fly, that is, and still your degree by the University of Nicosia would be verifiable objectively by anyone else and would be a tamper-proof degree. So this is just the first case of such applications. We're going to see many others, and it's going to be a very interesting experience for me and people like me that work in academia to see how our world is changing. I've got a number of ideas on this, but we probably don't have the time here. I would love to have a more detailed discussion with those of you that are interested in Moodle. The final question we had on Moodle was by Akinwale, if I read the name correctly, but is asking about the recent hard fork on Bitcoin Cash. Okay, that's an interesting one. Again, it's outside the scope of today's discussion. So let me go back to the questions on the YouTube chat, and I will get back to this one when we finish. Where are we? Sorry, there's a lot of discussion here that I missed, so let me see. Nishad is saying, wouldn't central banks no longer need commercial banks for distribution of money creation? Yes, that's true. In a CBDC scenario, technically you don't need the commercial banks for the creation, but you need them for a number of other services they provide to the economy, which would probably not be wise to be provided by the central bank. So the issuer of money shouldn't be the manager of money in any economy, so that's not going to be a problem for the commercial banks. Rahul is mentioning Project Coca in South Africa and Ubin in Singapore that have used Quorum, the blockchain that was initially developed by JP Morgan for a two-tiered system. I guess you mean by for CBDC creation. I'm not familiar with the project, sorry. Rich is asking whether the central bank role should be monetary policy, not account service. Well, who says so? I mean, there's nothing written in in the Bible about what the role of the central bank should be. It is monetary policy today. No one can say that there's a fundamental economic reason why central banks shouldn't do account management, and especially in the presence of technologies like blockchain, the arguments are more in favor rather than against central banks doing that. Daniel is saying in a tokenized real estate or real estate probably scenario, what do you think would be the main source of financing? Retail, government, crypto, banks, or all of them? Do you see any other player arising in this scenario? If this is a question about real estate tokenization, it's an application that I work a lot on. I think it's going to be one of the very revolutionary applications of blockchain, because blockchain is fundamentally going to create liquid markets where they do not exist today, and the global real estate market is an archaic market. It still lives on the 19th century, so it's going to be jumping very dramatically to the 21st century with these technologies. Yes, I see many players emerging there, and I would love to have a discussion with you on the details of that if you're interested. Victoria is saying that if banks can be replaced by central banks, then central banks can be replaced by banks. That's very interesting. No, they cannot, because commercial banks do not have a mandate of creating money, but this is nowadays. It has not always been the case. The commercial banks started by creating money. They were printing money, and historically the first issuers of modern money as we know it, the modern fiat currency, were the commercial banks. If you go to Scotland today, I think still the banks issue their currency. They are denominated in British pounds, of course, but you can have in Scotland, a British pound that does not have the Queen in it, but is being issued by the Royal Bank of Scotland or whatever. So the central banks can do everything that the commercial banks can do, but the commercial banks cannot do everything that the central banks can do today, because the central banks are the ones that have the monopoly vested to them by the state for creating money. Ludovic is asking me to explain the concept of singularity. Yes, sorry. If it was not clear, singularity, first of all, singularity as a term comes from physics. So if you have read about the Big Bang, when the universe was created, that moment was a singularity. And it's called a singularity because it's a moment in which something so significant, so dramatic happens that whatever happens after that is a result only of the event and not of the events that preceded the singularity event. It sounds a bit complicated, and it is, but in terms of the universe creation, the idea is that the Big Bang explosion was so significant and so dramatic that it created a universe that would look a few billion years later exactly like the one that we live in today, regardless of what existed before the Big Bang. So the Big Bang was so influential that it wiped out any significance of what existed before it. So the singularity now is a term that has been borrowed by artificial intelligence researchers to refer to a situation in which, as I said in the beginning of this lecture, what would happen when machines become more intelligent than humans. This is going to be a so vastly different world than the one that we live in today that it doesn't make any difference how our world today operates. A machine-dominated world would be vastly and utterly different to its very core. Yota is saying that this pandemic cannot be considered as a black swan event, as it was somehow predicted, but unfortunately no proper precautions and pre-measures were taken by related organizations or governments. Well, it was not a black swan event in the sense that we had predicted that it would happen at some point, but it was a black swan event in the sense that we couldn't have predicted when it will happen. So, it's easy in the aftermath of events, it's easy to say that, we should have done things, but what if we did things and then the pandemic didn't strike for another 200 years? It's difficult to discuss the optimal ways of responding to an event in the aftermath of an event. With the benefit of hindsight, we know what we should have done, but perhaps even as late as last November, a year before today, no one could have predicted. I'm not saying that things shouldn't have happened, but I'm saying that things are a bit more complicated. Joseph is saying that Lebanese central bank has announced last week that they will introduce a CBDC by 2021, knowing that the country is in a deep financial and political crisis. Do you think this would be a good direction to take, or is it just very complex to implement in such a short period? Remember, that's a very good question. Remember that I said earlier that crises tend to accelerate pre-existing trends. And it's interesting for me that if we take this to the example of CBDCs, all CBDCs have a sort of crisis behind them in the motivation of the central bank to start seriously discussing about issuing a currency, not just researching it or whatever. Be that the competition by private money, like Libra, be that the competition of another major economy when it comes to the ECB or the Fed moving now to counteract against the People's Bank of China, or whether it goes for small economies that are in crisis and they think of these as potential ways in which they can leapfrog themselves out of the current crisis. So I think it's a good direction to take in principle. We'll need to see the details, of course, to discuss it in practice. And I think this is all that I see in the chat. If there's something that I missed, because there were lots of comments, and thank you for those, please write them again. We have a couple of minutes before we finish, and I would like to get back to Akinwell's question regarding the hard fork on Bitcoin Cash. So I'm not sure what you would like me to explain. The idea in the let's say the hard fork, as you know, is when a community is having disagreements about how a particular monetary policy or other parameter of a decentralized system is going to work. And in the case of Bitcoin Cash, we have seen a number of forks. I mean, Bitcoin Cash itself was created as a fork of Bitcoin. There was a proposal by one of the developers of Bitcoin Cash to introduce what they call the miner tax. So they wanted to tax each coin-based transaction, so each new block with an 8% tax that would go towards the foundation or some other central entity. And there was a big backlash from the community of Bitcoin Cash. And as it happens in these cases, they signaled some of the miners signaled that they would not follow the proposed change. So when the change was enacted in the code, the chain split, and we had one chain that did not follow the new rules, one chain that did follow the new rules. In these cases, two things tend to happen. Either the community is really split and both blockchains live on for posterity, like what happened in the case of Ethereum with Ethereum Classic, one of them being larger than the others but still viable, or in most cases the vast majority of miners would signal support for one of the two protocols and the other will die. It's an interesting thing in any case because hard forks do not exist in fiat currency. You wouldn't split your dollars by taking scissors and cutting them in half and then having two dollars in two different monetary systems. So we both the economics and the behavioral properties of hard forks are very interested to discuss. Okay, wow, I see quite a few more comments in the post. In the chat, let me go through them. Rich is saying that the Fed had more conversation this year because of the COVID payment disbursement that would have taken years in a regular environment. Yes, that's an excellent point. Having a CBDC in place would have allowed governments in a pandemic or other major crisis to literally airdrop money to everyone in the population. So it's again, I think, a sign of how a crisis tends to accelerate pre-existing trends that I see many CBDCs coming up in the future having this as a motivation as well. That's an excellent point. I have a couple of you that are interested in the tokenized real estate discussion. So what I will do, let me make a note of this. I will start a thread on Moodle and I will invite those of you that are interested in that to get there, and we'll discuss it, and we will see whether we do a Zoom call or something to discuss it in more details. We have Lisa from the Bahamas and saying that their central bank was motivated to issue CBDCs after the Hurricane Dorian devastated two islands. Interested? I knew about the Bahamas CBDC thing. I didn't know that the motivation was again a crisis. Thank you for that piece of information. I think it validates even further the theory of crisis-induced innovation. Ludovic again on real estate. Yes, I will do that on Moodle. Okay, the others are replies to students' comments. Okay, I think this is it as far as questions are concerned, and we're already a bit beyond our allotted time. So thank you for your patience. Next week, we're going to do a quick session focused on what you see in this slide. So how will the machine economy of the future look like? What are examples of situations in which blockchain converges with artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things, and maybe other exponential technologies like virtual and augmented reality, to create applications that now seem like science fiction but will be important in the future. And since next week is going to be our last session, I am also going to give you a couple of announcements regarding both our MSA and about opportunities for working in some of these things for those of you that are interested, like for example real estate tokenization or cryptocurrency trading or CBDCs. Next week we are going to release a major report on the state of the European blockchain ecosystem. So I will be sending this on Moodle, and will follow up the discussion next week. So this is it for today. Thank you all very much, and see you next Thursday.